These days, it seems like most people are interested in the paranormal, especially ghosts and hauntings. Well, one of the truly most, to me, enigmatic hauntings is that of the White House with the ghost of President Abraham Lincoln. So let's take a little look at what's going on there and what has gone on there. Take America's royal residence, the White House, examine tales of hauntings that have surrounded it for nearly 2 centuries, and add Abraham Lincoln, an odd president who believed in the occult and was murdered while in office, and you have the recipe for America's most famous ghost story. According to legend, shortly before Lincoln was elected to his first term in 1860, he saw a double image of himself while gazing in the mirror at his Illinois home. One was his normal reflection, and the other a pale double. Mrs. Lincoln didn't see the second image, but was convinced that it was a sign. The sharper image, she said, represented Lincoln completing his first term. The other was a sign that he would be reelected, but would die before completing his second term. As Lincoln began his first term, the nation was on the verge of the Civil War. In the midst of trying to reunify the divided country, Lincoln faced a terrible personal tragedy. His 11-year-old son Willie died from a fever in 1862. A grief-stricken Mrs. Lincoln conducted seances in hopes of contacting the boy, and although the skeptical president never participated in the seances, historians say his wife's belief in the supernatural may eventually have rubbed off on him. Lincoln suffered restless nights with nightmares and premonitions of his own death. He once told his wife about a dream where he was asleep and then was woken by the sounds of someone crying, and he went to the East Room and found the source of the sobs, mourners and a casket, and he asked a woman who died. The assassinated president, she told him. Lincoln walked over to the casket and saw himself inside. Several months later, on the morning of April 14, 1865, Lincoln called an emergency meeting of the cabinet and delivered a cryptic message. He said, "Expect important news soon. I have had a dream," he told them. "I am on a boat, alone in the ocean. I have no oars, no rudder. I am helpless." That evening, while attending a play at Ford's Theater, Lincoln was shot from behind by John Wilkes Booth, and he died the next morning at 7:22 a.m. Parapsychologists define ghosts as people who died with unfinished business, and Lincoln certainly fits the bill. The Confederacy had surrendered only 5 days before Lincoln's assassination, but the United States was in disarray. The economy of the South had been decimated by the war. Hatred and animosity were rampant, and Lincoln's plans for repairing the nation were cut short by his murder. As a result, does Lincoln's ghost still roam the halls of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? Many subsequent residents and visitors have been convinced that indeed it does. So let's look at some of the reported sightings. The Teddy Roosevelt White House was from 1901 to 1909, and Mr. Roosevelt said, "I think of Lincoln, shambling, homely, with his strong, sad, deeply furrowed face all the time. I see him in the different rooms and in the halls." Skeptics maintain that this quote by President Roosevelt was taken out of context, but believers in the spirit world say that Roosevelt was speaking literally, that he actually saw Lincoln's ghost. Now, when Coolidge was in the White House, Calvin Coolidge, his wife Grace, claimed she saw the tall figure of Lincoln at the window in the Oval Office, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out over the Potomac River, perhaps still seeing the bloody battlefields beyond. And then in the FDR White House, 1933 to 45, there were quite a few incidences. For example, while sleeping in the White House, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands was awakened one night by knocks at her bedroom door, and when she answered it, the former president was standing before her. The Queen fainted, and when she came to, the ghost was gone. For a time, the Lincoln bedroom was Eleanor Roosevelt's study, and the First Lady claimed she could feel the presence of the former president. She said, "Sometimes when I worked at my desk late at night, I'd get a feeling that someone was standing behind me. I'd have to turn around and look." A few years later, In the same room, a seamstress was working on the drapes and kept hearing a sound of someone approaching the bedroom door, but nobody ever came in. She found a White House butler and asked him why he kept pacing back and forth. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied. "I haven't been on that floor." That was Abe. And then Winston Churchill, a frequent guest during World War II at the White House, had an eventful night in the Lincoln bedroom. He was found the next morning sleeping on the floor of the room across the hall. He told no one what happened that night, but he vowed never to set foot in the Lincoln bedroom again. Then jumping ahead somewhat, when Gerald Ford was president from 74 to 77, his daughter Susan was so sure that she felt Lincoln's ghost in the White House that she wouldn't set foot in the Lincoln bedroom either. And when President Reagan was in office from 1981 to 1989, the most prominent modern sightings came from yet another presidential daughter, Maureen Reagan, along with her husband, Dennis Revel. And one night while in the Lincoln bedroom, they both saw an aura, sometimes red, sometimes orange. According to Reagan, it was the ghost of President Lincoln. And just as mysterious is the fact that the Reagan's dog Lucky would never enter the Lincoln bedroom. She would, however, stand in the hallway and bark at something inside. And still even more recently, the Clintons' White House from 1993 to 2001, a high percentage of people who work here won't go in the Lincoln bedroom, said President Clinton's social secretary, Capricia Marshall. According to Marshall, many White House maids and butlers swear that they have seen Lincoln's ghost there. I can certainly understand if a spirit sticks around because of unfinished business. Certainly, as I said in the beginning, President Lincoln had every reason to stay around, because his work was cut short by Mr. Booth. But I hope you've enjoyed. I know there are more legends out there about Lincoln's ghost, but these are the ones I have readily at hand, and I hope that you enjoyed this little brief enigmatic trip into the paranormal world of ghosts.